We are
live in our studio.
We're live in our studio. Welcome to the studio audience.
Hey,
Welcome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being
good
here.
to see you, John.
Yeah, appreciate it. Welcome to another episode of the DASCO podcast. Here at DASCO Learning, we're focused on helping people think better, communicate better, grow intentionally, especially in a world where tools are getting smarter, but somehow the work still feels messier. Today's episode is all about how to run effective meetings and how to avoid those meetings that suck. And it falls directly into our career growth stage, because if you're an individual contributor, if you're a new manager, or someone trying to stand out at work even, how you show up in meetings, how you plan for meetings, if you're the one creating it or just participating in it, this directly impacts your credibility, your influence, and your growth. So let's get right to it.
How many times have you overheard someone who recently attended a meeting walk away and say, you could have just emailed that to me?
Just send me the email.
So today we're going to focus on why are meetings ultimately killing some productivity within businesses? What can leaders and individual contributors do to change that? And then how does AI fit into the picture without removing the human aspect of it? So in today's episode, we're going to have the DASCO download. We're going to have a listener question or Ask DASCO section. We'll have an AI hot take, and then we'll get into the bulk of the content, which is ultimately how do we run more effective meetings? And we'll have a little bit of a playbook for you.
So whether you're a small business, whether you're an individual contributor, a business owner, a team lead for a small company, a big company, medium-sized company, if you're just looking to grow, these tips are going to help you get the most out of all of this time spent communicating with other people in groups. I think it's time for the DASCO download.
The DASCO download.
You know, we don't have a lot of money in our budget for audio, but we'll take a look at that. We'll reassess for next year. Okay, let's kick this off with some data. For those people that aren't watching, you're just listening, here's some sound effect for you. That's a paper that I have with some details on it. Okay, so there's a Harvard Business Review conducted last summer. They did some studies around meetings in general and their effect on employees, their effect on productivity. So let me throw this at you. Back in the 1960s, on average, meetings took up about less than 10 hours of our work week. Okay. Now, fast forward to today, how many hours do you think it takes up? What would you say?
My guess would be roughly 25 hours.
You're spot on. 23 plus hours on average for people today in work environments, corporate environments, that sort of thing. 65% of the people surveyed said meetings block real work. 71% say meetings are unproductive. 64% say they kill deep thinking. But here's the problem. If this was all just holistically true, why do we still have so many meetings? Well, there's a flip side. There's a polar opposite view on why we need meetings. And it makes sense. So another study where executives and employees were asked a few questions about meetings. 86% of employees and executives say lack of collaboration and ineffective communication are the main causes of workplace failures. That makes a lot of sense. Without meetings, you have fragmented emails, you have miscommunication, you have missed information, maybe lack of strategic objectives, certain people, components missing deadlines. That makes sense. Another positive reinforcement on why we have so many meetings during the week. Teams that communicate frequently are 25% more likely to make faster decisions and execute them effectively. So here you have the crux of this entire episode is we have to have meetings. We know that there's a value in collaboration and communication and staying on time, exceeding deadlines, reducing budget, increasing productivity. But there is a line that we cross oftentimes in a corporate world where they become ineffective and they become a waste of time. And too many people are there. So if meetings are both broken and yet necessary at the same time, how do we make them better? Especially depending on whether or not you're the audience member, you're somebody that's attending these meetings as an individual contributor, or maybe you're the one organizing these meetings and running these meetings.
Yeah, and ultimately, what it comes down to is how do you drive the engagement within that within the specific meetings, where people feel like they're involved, they're walking away with actionable items. We'll talk more about that, but this kind of leads into our Ask DASCO.
Ask DASCO. Ask DASCO.
And the question came up. We've heard this many a times. But how do I ensure that my participants are actively involved within the meeting and not sitting silently? And my first thought is silence within meetings doesn't necessarily mean disengagement. It might just mean uncertainty. They don't know going into the meeting what to expect. So ultimately, how do we solve for that uncertainty? It's going to come down to a number of different things. It could be something as simple as prime their thinking, sending out communication ahead of time with an agenda, some prompts, some pre-work, if you will, that will allow them to immediately get involved prior to coming into the meeting.
Let's talk about some examples of meetings that we're all in. We've got virtual meetings. There's a lot of companies now that work remotely. So we've got Zoom calls. We've got live meetings. Some people are in office. They're booking cubicles all of the time. We've got small businesses out there where a lot of times it's just 2 or 3 people, drivers coordinating with managers to get to places and make sure customers are taken care of. And so the impact of all of that time spent is gigantic. And that's essentially what we're talking about today. The impact of that can be helpful and supportive and productive in revenue earning, revenue generating, or that time could be revenue wasting.
I think of another example of a meeting that could be revenue driving or essentially revenue lost. And that is for those that are in sales, you schedule a meeting. You finally are able to get your foot in the door to schedule a meeting with a potential client. And how you show up in advance of that meeting, of course, during the meeting and then after the meeting, can be altering of whether you potentially close that client or lose that client naturally within meetings. You have certain agenda items. Each maybe participant has specific parts that they're taking. But how do you ultimately call on those participants who are maybe sitting silently? Because everybody's different in consuming information and maybe sharing ideas.
I've struggled with this a lot myself too. One thing that I think that enhances brainstorming in a meeting, when you want ideas and no one's talking, a lot of it is a lack of structure reduces the ability for people to brainstorm because there's still a lot of, what am I doing here? What is my role in this meeting? What's my takeaway from this meeting? A lot of people with more questions than freedom to respond and react. When there's structure, when there's role clarity, when those things are prepared really well, the brainstorming does come more naturally. And all of a sudden you get a lot more ideas. You get more participation.
There's a lot of participants that come in just to take notes and feel like I'm part of the group, but they're not involved. So how do you get those folks more involved? Maybe it is rotating some of the facilitation to these participants so they're empowered to take ownership of the meeting as well. So those are just a few ideas to think through. When you have those silent participants, they may not necessarily be disengaged. They just need some help in opening up during those meetings and feeling like they understand why they're there ahead of time.
I think we're going to find that as we go farther and farther into this discussion, how important it is to clarify the purpose and roles and agenda for every meeting that we have, and how much farther that goes, and not only just making the meeting better, but also helping us identify on occasion, wait a second, if this is my purpose and these are the roles, maybe this meeting isn't actually necessary because we have this other meeting with a similar purpose and similar roles already scheduled for tomorrow.
Sometimes it feels like Groundhog Day.
There you go.
When you attend 2 or 3 meetings within a week period, couple weeks, and you're like, I feel like we just talked about this.
Yeah, there's a difference between urgency and needing to stay on top of things because you have deadlines, and just the redundancy of certain topics. Here's a great example of not just, sometimes when we think about running meetings that are effective or ineffective, we think about small meetings with our teams, our peers. How about these big events that companies put on where they're bringing in clients, customers, prospective clients, or just a ton of internal employees to celebrate, to learn, that sort of thing? I've been to some of those that were fantastic. They were engaging, thoughtful. I walked away with very specific things I knew I needed to do. I felt like I contributed. I felt like I learned. I've also been to some where I walked away thinking, man, that must have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm not sure exactly what it is that I picked up from that. Did I learn something? Am I supposed to do something? I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do. Thanks for a trophy. Not sure exactly what my next steps are. Talk about financial waste and just waste of productivity too. So there's a big risk. It's you can't just get people together and high five and expect great feelings. You put yourself at risk for later on. A lot of people saying, man, could have probably emailed that to me. I think it's time for an AI hot take.
Let's do it.
What can AI do and what can't AI do when it comes to running effective meetings?
AI can help run effective meetings by automating scheduling, summarizing key points, and even suggesting agendas based on past discussions. It can also transcribe and highlight action items so everyone's clear on next steps. However, AI can't replace the human elements of a meeting, like reading the room, handling nuanced emotions, or making complex context-based decisions. It supports the process, but doesn't fully substitute for human leadership.
There's a great answer from ChatGPT right there. And this is a primary point of these meetings. AI is a fantastic tool that we can use to save time with all of the preparation and all of the recapping that has to happen before and after a meeting. It can also record a lot of information during the meeting to make summaries faster. So the before, the during, and the after, AI can really help reduce time spent, reduce time wasted, creating the agendas, the documents, the preparation, the talk tracks, all of those things. And that's fantastic. What it cannot do is it can't replace the human elements of running effective meetings, like reading the room, fostering a collaborative environment. Exactly what types of questions are you going to ask to draw out the brainstorming? Is there a safe space, a feeling of safety for people to participate and not be worried about whether or not their ideas are good or bad?
Yeah. And one of the things that we talk about often, Scott, as far as why AI cannot replace humans in a lot of positions is critical thinking skills. The critical thinking skills that humans possess will never be replaced by artificial intelligence.
There you have it.
AI hot take. That's your AI hot take.
Pew, 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 pew.
So speaking in the aspect of how AI will not be able to replace the human competencies and skill sets that are necessary when it comes to running effective meetings or meetings that don't suck. Let's talk about the cost and the impact of running meetings that are ineffective. So you think about the burnout that happens, because now you have maybe 40 hours of your normal work week, the tasks that you have to complete, the other sales calls that you have to go on. Now you're talking 60 plus hour work weeks. People get burnt out.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And, it's dependent upon the job. There could be plenty of jobs out there where if you're having meetings 23 plus hours a week, but they're all fairly effective and they're all organized, role clarity, recaps, next steps, positive intentions, good brainstorming. Well, then that world exists, and that's fine. That's a great use of those 23 plus hours. But for a lot of people, regardless of what that time might look like for you, there's probably a lot of people out there that would argue they're probably in a few too many meetings to be productive. You get your team, your peers, your employees get to spend more time doing work as opposed to talking about doing work.
Yeah. Another stat that we have here that 61% of executives say at least half of decision-making time is ineffective.
Wow.
That's staggering.
Yeah. Taking too long to make decisions. Perhaps an outcome, once again, of ineffective meetings.
Yeah. The action items that come out of meetings or lack thereof.
Yep. We've had some of those ourselves, and just planning and preparing for what we do on a regular basis. We walk away sometimes knowing that meeting was really effective. We got a lot done. Other times, what did we just accomplish? Did we accomplish anything? Was there at least some good ideating, brainstorming? Sometimes there are, sometimes there haven't been.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just moving on to the next priority.
Okay. So we spent a lot of time through these questions, through Ask DASCO, the AI hot take, the DASCO download. So let's talk a little bit more about how to make these effective and a good use of time.
So coming prepared to a meeting is the first step. I mentioned prime some thinking ahead of time, right? Define the purpose, have the agenda sent out ahead of time. That way everybody is understanding what their role, what they're expected of during this meeting.
What do you expect from me while I'm at this meeting? That helps me understand a lot. That helps me feel better about my participation, helps me feel more confident and comfortable showing up to the meeting. It puts me at ease.
Yeah. Who's going to be attending? Making sure that the right audience is involved. What's their role going to be? I think about a lot of teams work together cross-functionally to achieve greater goals. And sometimes having some individuals attend these meetings isn't absolutely necessary. They should be in the know, but do they have to attend an hour-long meeting when maybe they only need 10 minutes of the content that's coming out of that meeting? So that's important too, that the audience that is attending, is it appropriate?
Be prepared to carry forward. Be prepared to listen. Be prepared to provide information. Those are key components of helping the entire audience understand what their responsibility is going to be so they can show up ready and more engaged. And that increases participation, makes the meeting feel effective for everybody involved.
Right. Another thing I think about is the length of the meeting.
Part of the preparation is understanding how long am I legitimately going to need to accomplish the things I need to accomplish. How often do people book an hour for a meeting just because it's arbitrary?
I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in where you have leaders that start the conversation and then they ask for participation, and then things go off on tangents that are completely irrelevant to that meeting itself. So having a facilitator that actually keeps the meeting on track.
Have you ever given somebody a time and then they go over. And you just have that awkward frustration of, when do I step in and tell this person that time's up? And how do I do that in front of a lot of people?
That's a skill in itself. We could talk about this for probably 30 minutes.
Well, emotionally, when that happens, you go through this whole process in your head where you're starting to get flustered because you have certain things. And now all of a sudden you have to either decide, am I going to interrupt this person, possibly ruin their day for the sake of my meeting? Is that more important, or is it more important to stick to my agenda and get some of those things done, because it's critical that we do those?
And I think it goes back to a lot of the planning, right? If you know you're going to be calling on specific participants to deliver a portion, if they're going to speak to a priority, whatever the case may be, prepping them in advance, letting them know that you only have 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And by the
it's
way,
really important that you stay on track in that 5 minutes. Maybe I'll give you a little indicator that you're coming up on time, because I've been in meetings before where I'm listening to people rant and rave, and like you can see the facilitator, the leader of the meeting, just getting antsy.
But here's the thing you got to remember. No matter what position you're in, if you're CEO of a big corporation, middle management, individual contributor, we all like direction. It's okay to tell that executive, hey, hard stop at 5 minutes. I've got X, Y, and Z to get through, and it's critical that I do that, but your contribution is super valuable. But you've got a hard stop at 5 minutes. People appreciate that regardless of their level.
I was going to say, you know how much more they appreciate that than having the meeting run over 15 minutes, and then that eats into the next meeting, which then it impacts the following meeting, and so on and so forth. If you can't structure the meeting in a time-appropriate manner, prepare those individuals who are going to speak, and set them up for success with the time frame that they have allotted, then again, these meetings run more efficiently.
One thing that Dave and I probably teach the most to people that we work with are communication skills. And we teach the specific behaviors that go along with effective communication, presentation skills, and that really matters with running an effective meeting. And this is where another way that meetings can suck is when people don't have great volume, great tone, choice of words, pre-planned ways to gain engagement through the right questions, thoughtful questions. Those are all components of really effective communication. And those are things that Dave and I spend most of our time teaching. So another thing you can work on if you're somebody running meetings, or if you're an individual contributor and you're someone that's trying to stand out in meetings, and you're in meetings a lot, well, this is your presence. This is how you're ultimately graded by a lot of different people. So how you engage in these meetings is also important. And that comes down to your volume, your tone, your ability to think with emotional intelligence and ask thoughtful questions without rubbing people the wrong way.
Let's circle back to our AI hot take. How do the tools help you be more effective, more efficient in utilizing AI? Number one, it's automation of scheduling can be very effective. How do we capture notes within our meetings that don't require human beings to physically type, write down those notes, hopefully capture all of the main ingredients that was discussed, and then delivering a recap that is succinct, that is helpful enough for our participants to walk away.
If you're a large corporation, at this point, you probably have some sort of enterprise level support with AI, whether it's ChatGPT, Copilot, some other form of it, to where you probably have the ability, and you are hopefully leveraging that ability to use voice to text to create an agenda in a matter of a couple minutes, as opposed to maybe 15 to 20 minutes. So people come to the meeting showing up, knowing what their role clarity is. And like you said, the scheduling and planning now is so much easier than it ever has been. So a lot less just manual typing and entry of information. So that's hopefully what we're using it for. If you're a smaller company and you haven't invested in those things yet, highly recommend that you do. Whether it's for you or for clients, even if it's just you and maybe 9 other people running a company, these tools can help you out tremendously. So definitely dive in and use them if you're not already. Okay, it's time for our DASCO challenge. We want to leave you with some very specific things that you can do to assess whether or not your meetings are effective or not, and what to do about it to make sure that they are going forward. For the next 3 meetings that you have, I want, whether you're an individual contributor, maybe you're invited to these meetings, maybe you're running these meetings. I want you to look at each one of these and try to understand, what is my role? Does everybody have a clear role prior to going into this meeting in terms of what are they trying to do in this meeting? Are we getting information? Are we giving information? Are there going to be directives? Do you know who is speaking, who's not speaking? Is there an agenda that's already been sent out? Is there a plan for you to recap and assess things after the meeting is over? Is that something that's on your schedule? How are you going to use AI tools to help you during this meeting?
If you can answer all of those questions, then you're in a really good spot. If you cannot answer some or even one of these questions, what do you need to do to fix these meetings? Do you need to cancel the meetings? Do you need to reduce the time? All of these questions, if you're asking yourself leading up to or as you walk away from each of them, you're going to be more effective in running your future meetings, and your teams will be much more highly engaged in future meetings, and they won't feel like they're walking into unnecessary wastes of time.
Is this meeting about getting new ideas and brainstorming, or are you looking for execution? Are you going to be required to execute? Are you being required to come up with new, thoughtful, creative approaches to things, to innovate? These are really important to understand before you go into the meeting, not just showing up to the meeting and then being told.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the DASCO podcast. Please share your comments, your thoughts, ideas. Maybe you have a question related to meetings. Maybe it's related to communication, leadership skills, coaching. We're here to help you be more successful as a leader, as an individual contributor in your life professional skills. So thank you for your time.
Thanks to our studio audience. You guys were great.
You guys were fantastic.
Really appreciate it. You guys are wonderful.
Bevo, Kona, you're the best.
Thanks for joining. See you guys soon.